At this hour, there are severe thunderstorms dotting the map from southeast Texas into parts of Iowa and westward to Montana. We'll detail those storms and the potential for others coming up on Storm Watch. But first, very latest fascinating information on what's heating up now in the tropics. Here's our tropical update with the Weather Channel's Dr. Steve Lyons.
Well, thank you, Dan. We've got some interesting information and also some serious information for some of you out there in the islands. Our tropical depression has been upgraded to Tropical Storm Bonnie. Here's the latest information as of 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. 17.9 north, 60.7 west. That's about 75 miles east of the northern Leeward Islands. Winds 50 miles per hour, moving to the west-northwest at a very fast clip, 25 miles per hour. Now keep in mind, this was a couple of hours ago. It's already moved another 50 miles. So now it's only about 25 miles to the east of the northern Leeward Islands. Now the good thing about this is that we do have some watches and warnings up, but I'll tell you in a second what the good thing is. The warnings are for the U.S. and British Virgin Islands for tropical storm warnings. That means tropical storm winds are likely to be observed. We also have tropical storm watches for the Antigua, Barbuda, Anguilla, and the following islands here, and also for Puerto Rico, which means tropical storm winds are possible within the next 36 hours. And of course, at the speed this is moving, what that means is tropical storm winds are possible within the next 10 or 12 hours is more like it. Now, if we look at the satellite imagery of what it looks like here, you can see that the latest image centers right in here. It's moving very quickly. Quite a bit of thunderstorm activity on the northern side, and it's moving very quickly. The important thing to remember here is most of the strong winds in this system are on the north side of the system, and all the islands are on the south side, which is great news. Now, as this system continues to move to the west, we expect continued very slow but steady development and a continued west-northwest track. You can see an upper-level cirrus sheet bending clockwise, which is what we call anticyclonic, around it. And that's a sort of a protective sheet. And so it's moving under a little more favorable environment for further development. Now, if we look at what's going on right now, here's the latest radar from San Juan. This is actually up in the Coqui rainforest here, not really in San Juan, but it's called the San Juan radar. And here comes the rain bands in here. So we're going to get quite a bit of rain showers, but the system is moving to the west so quickly, I don't think we'll have any major concern for any flash flooding or anything unless the system does something different in a hurry, and I don't think that's going to happen. So I think the winds here are not going to be too bad for you, but we have to watch down the road what's going to happen with this thing, so you need to pay attention if you're downstream from that west-northwest track. Another interesting thing we've been looking at, another low pressure center is formed in the Gulf of Mexico. Here it is right out in here, somewhere in the general vicinity of this area right now. And the hurricane hunters are on their way out. As a matter of fact, they're only about a half hour away from it. They're probably somewhere out in here if we could actually see them. Of course, we can't on the satellite. You can see a lot of thunderstorm activity in the Gulf. And the same thing in this system. The southern edge of winds is relatively light, but up in through here and even at the mouth of the Mississippi, we've had very strong winds. So you boaters, be careful out here in these thunderstorms. Winds are 25 to 30 miles an hour in squally thunderstorm-like weather. Now, this system is relatively weak now, but we do think there's a low pressure center. It could be upgraded to a tropical depression depending on what the hurricane hunters find here. So stay tuned to the Weather Channel. We'll give you the latest on that. You can see the thunderstorm activity associated with it right there, and a lot of other thunderstorms up in the central Gulf of Mexico. The Caribbean, luckily, is quiet for now, and you can see Bonnie creeping into the picture here with Florida up in here. The general track for Bonnie takes it somewhere in the general direction of out in this area in about 48 to 72 hour time frame. So we're not too certain. It's a long way out to tell whether or not it's going to curve or head toward Florida or anywhere else. But stay tuned to the Weather Channel for the latest. There's Bonnie there. We have another system to worry about back to the south and east. This system is spinning fairly well, and if it continues on the same track, may become a depression in the next day or so. But right now, it's a long way from anywhere. Here are the islands way out here. It's at least 1,500 miles to the east of the islands. And all the way, as we go all the way to the African coast, we see another system of thunderstorms coming off the coast, but ill-organized at this stage. And out in the Pacific, luckily it's quiet there. We have a couple of systems trying to develop, one to the southwest of the Gulf of Tehuantepec, but it's moving away from the coast. Well, let's get back to Dan now and see what weather is going on across the United States.
Thank you very much, Steve. We take a look at the U.S. satellite loop, and we find thunderstorms are becoming quite active now from southeastern Texas, where there are severe thunderstorm warnings in effect for Harris and Orange counties, on up across portions of Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, into Montana and South Dakota. Stay with us for complete details coming up on Weather Center.
A new tropical storm spins westward in the Atlantic. We'll show you where Bonnie may be headed next on Weather Center after your local forecast.
So, you're going to take your act on the road, huh?
Don't worry.
Well, at Alamo, the going rate is going down.
Well, it's 10 minutes till the hour, so it must be time for a storm watch at the Weather Channel. At Storm Watch, we take all the active weather across the country and break it apart and look where some of the worst conditions are that could be affecting you and your family. We'll talk more about the weather across the contiguous 48 coming up momentarily. Now we need to talk tropics, the tropical update, which is also a part of Storm Watch. We begin now with a look at the tropics with Dr. Steve Lyons.
Well, thanks, Paul. And we've got some things going on here in our tropical update. Obviously, if you haven't already heard, we have Tropical Storm Bonnie out there in the Atlantic, heading just north of the islands right now. Here's the latest coordinates as of 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. 18.6 north, 61.5 west. That's 60 miles to the north-northeast of Barbuda, the island of Barbuda, which is about right here. Here's Puerto Rico here, Dominican Republic, and then on to the mainland U.S. and South Florida. Continues to move in a general direction to the west-northwest. We've had a few wobbles today in repositioning the system as it's continued to evolve. Now we have some tropical storm watches and warnings out as well. Tropical storm warnings remain in effect for the U.S. and British Virgin Islands. You can see that's primarily this area right in here. And we have watches still out for the following islands here, including Barbuda and also the island of Puerto Rico. So the system is going to skirt just north of the islands, and we can see that on our satellite imagery here. Here's Puerto Rico over here. Here's the string of islands right here, and Barbuda's right here. We've had some reports of some gusty winds there, but the center is to the north, and all of the very strong wind is on the northern sector. Winds up here, we've seen some ship reports and some satellite winds on the order of 40 to 50 miles per hour. Luckily, those will stay on the north side the next 24 hours or so as the system continues to move to the west-northwest and intensifies very slowly. Now the San Juan radar, actually the radar is up in the mountains here, latest radar, you can see some shower bands continuing to move over the islands of St. Thomas, St. Croix, and Puerto Rico, but the system is moving very quickly, so we don't expect any major flooding potential out of it as it moves on to the west at 25 miles an hour. Now, one thing to keep in mind, what is it going to do as it approaches the U.S. coast? Well, right now the track is to continue on that west-northwest track, and that takes it to the southeast to the southern Bahamas in about 60 to 72 hours. And beyond that, we have to wait and see. But right now, NOAA has its jet aircraft and the P-3s out there dropping a whole series of drop wind sound devices which measure the wind, temperature, and pressure everywhere to better initialize our numerical model. So we should have a much better forecast of which way it's going by early tomorrow morning. So stay tuned to the Weather Channel. We'll give you all the updates on that. Now, another system we had been watching was in the Gulf of Mexico, and this is a little bit scary because it's close to home. A low pressure center out here in the Gulf, roughly right around in this general vicinity. NOAA aircraft have flown into here just recently. They came out of it and said, well, we found a very weak indication of circulation, but as of right now, we don't see anything that warrants tropical depression stage at this time. And you can see the thunderstorms are waning just a little bit, but that doesn't mean it's gone for good. We have an upper level low moving over Texas, and it continues to creep ever so slowly to the west-northwest. So stay tuned to the Weather Channel on the potential for a tropical depression in the Gulf of Mexico in the next 6 to 24-hour time frame. Now elsewhere, you can see out in the Atlantic, here's Bonnie out here, another tropical low here in the Atlantic, and it continues to move toward the west at about 15 to 20 miles an hour, still about 1,500 miles to the
Thanks for
joining us, everyone, here at the Weather Channel. We have a lot to talk about in this edition of Storm Watch. Not only do we have some wet weather going on across the states of Iowa and Nebraska and reaching over into Illinois as we go through the night. We'll talk about that coming up in a few minutes. But the situation in the tropics is growing more active, it seems, with every passing hour. Now we have a tropical storm not only in the Atlantic Basin, but a new one in the Eastern Pacific Basin. So let's get right to it with our tropical update. And what we're looking at, we'll start it off in the Atlantic, where we have Tropical Storm Bonnie. Latest advisory out of the National Hurricane Center at 11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Top winds still pegged at 50 miles an hour. The storm is centered about 85 miles northeast of St. Martin in the northern Leeward Islands, and it is still moving at a fairly high clip, west-northwest at 24 miles an hour. Central pressure now at 1,001 millibars. Here's the current status of watches and warnings. All tropical storm. Puerto Rico, you're under a tropical storm watch. The northern Leeward Islands, you're under a tropical storm watch. The British and U.S. Virgin Islands under a tropical storm warning at this point. Now, the current forecast track from the Hurricane Center takes it pretty much just skirting along here just to the north of the island chain, and as we go through time, eventually turning the storm more to the north. We'll keep you updated as that forecast is refined by the National Hurricane Center as we get new data in, and as they get new data in from Hurricane Hunter planes going in and planes dropping measuring devices out in the environment ahead of the storm to see what the steering currents are. Fairly well-defined system here. You can see the outflow very nicely seen here on the western side of the storm. Now, the actual center of circulation isn't right under this blob of convection. It's more on the southern side of it. And the strongest winds all found by the latest Hurricane Hunter aircraft on the northern side of the storm. So that's good news. That is out over open water. We are seeing some rain showers come here across the Virgin Islands and on into Puerto Rico. You can see a little bit of that circulation here. You see how this bends down from west to southwest? That's that counterclockwise circulation. So we will see some squally weather in the Virgin Islands and reaching over especially onto the north shore of the island of Puerto Rico. So do be careful out there and watch for heavier rains and squally winds. We're also watching an area of disturbed weather here in the central Gulf of Mexico. Not very well organized, though. Hurricane Hunter aircraft went out to this area tonight or earlier this evening and reported a weak surface circulation, but nothing that was developing into something that at this point could be called tropical depression. However, there is a low pressure center out here. It is drifting slowly west, and it is likely that it will be bringing some gusty winds to the Texas Gulf Coast and some heavier rains also as we go through the day on Friday. So please be careful anywhere from Houston and Beaumont all the way down in toward Corpus Christi and Brownsville. Here's another look at what is Tropical Storm Bonnie right here, heading to the west-northwest. Another area of disturbed weather we're watching is here to the east of the islands. Nothing yet has been classified out of this one, but we will certainly be watching this area. As you can see, it does have a spin to it, but as of yet, it has not been named into a tropical depression, not just a tropical low, so we'll certainly be watching that. Farther east, off the coast of Africa, we're seeing a new line of thunderstorms getting ready to emerge off the coast, and other than that, there's that other spin we were mentioning heading across the central Atlantic. Let us jump now all the way into the eastern Pacific. Tropical Storm Howard. This storm was just classified as a tropical storm at 8 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Never was a tropical depression. It was promoted immediately to a tropical storm, primarily on the basis of a very gusty winds at a ship report right near the center. Top winds 50 miles an hour, moving west at 14 miles an hour, centered 430 miles south of Acapulco. So this is heading away from land. That's certainly some good news. Here it is right here. You can see that spin right here, and it is heading off to the west, so it is heading away from land. Okay, that wraps up the tropics. Let's head home now into the continental United States, and we are watching some wet weather going on here, right here, into Iowa, eastern Nebraska, and heading over into southern Wisconsin. Some strong thunderstorms possible here, and watch out for some severe weather possible in the Black Hills and heading back into southeastern Montana. All of this along a stalled out front. stretching from the Great Lakes back into the northern Rockies, and dew points quite high in this area. That's the moisture that is feeding these showers and thunderstorms. As we look at the situation really across much of northern and western Iowa, very wet weather right now. And as we head over into eastern Nebraska, some of that also here. So these are all going over the same areas, really. We're seeing the storms running over the same areas, so watch out. There are flood watches posted across parts of Iowa, eastern Nebraska, and even northwestern Illinois. Weather Center is next.
Next on Weather Center, we'll show you where rain may continue in the south and Midwest, plus the latest on Tropical Storm Bonnie. Details coming up after your local forecast.
So, you're going to take your act on the road, huh?
Don't worry,
Well, at Alamo, the going rate is going down.
drive happy.
All the way down to $25 a day in Florida. And everywhere else in the U.S., just $29 a day. Is this a fun country or what? Call 1-800-GO-ALAMO today.
Don't worry, drive happy.